Welcome to the Green Wasp Removal YouTube channel. In this episode, we'll show you an update on the relocated Yellowjacket nest that we removed from the soffit space of a client's home in August of 2022. You can check out our other videos to see that removal as it happened. Here's a little footage of it here. In this update video, we're going to show you how this relocated German Yellowjacket nest developed at our field lab from August through October of 2022. As you can see here, it was back on August 20th that we removed the nest from this client's home and put it into a jar and inside a box, and we just simply left it outside in our field lab to observe it. We filmed it periodically over the next 2 months, and that's what you'll see in this video. At the end of the video, you'll see us pull the nest out of the jar at the end of the season and dissect it, and we'll discover inside it an overwintering queen. And she was the sole survivor of this nest as of the date we filmed this on October 19th. You'll see how we collect this queen as a specimen, and we're going to try to overwinter her inside our research lab in one of our habitats and see if we can keep her alive throughout the winter. And in our next upcoming video, we'll show you how we set up her habitat and her winter lodgings in the research lab. So for now, let's get to this series of update videos. We started on August 23rd of 22. At the time this first update video was shot, it had only been 3 days since this nest had been relocated. There hadn't been much rebuilding yet on this nest. What you see primarily are adults that had been born here in this location. At the time of the removal from the client's property, most of the adults that were alive at the time were terminated through the vacuum extraction technique, so most of the adults were dead. There was a couple of adults in it, but mostly it was pupating, silk-capped adults that had not yet chewed their way out of the silk cap. So what you see here, most of this population inside the jar, these had chewed their way out of their silk caps at the end of their pupation and essentially were born in this relocated space. So this was their world. And as you can see, as of August 23rd, they had not yet begun to rebuild any of the paper envelope around the nest, and they were still getting acclimated to this space. There's still some live larvae in the open cells you can see that had not begun the pupation yet. They had not formed their silk caps. And it was interesting to see how those larvae might survive. And we were not sure if the larva would survive at all. Sometimes that larva will simply not survive. Other times it might. Here on August 24th, the next day, we added a rain cover to it to keep some of the water out of the nest so it didn't drown. And then a few days later, here on August 29th, we went back in to take a look and see how the nest had begun to develop inside this new space. So we'll switch over to field audio here for a little bit. The whirring sound or the motor sound you hear in the background of the field audio is the neck fans inside our bee suits. We wear neck fans to cool us. They're automated, battery-powered neck fans, and that's the sound you're going to hear in the background of the field audio. Looks like a good number of them have survived and hatched out on this nest. There's a little bit of paper rebuilt on the nest now. So they're starting to repair this nest and make it viable again. As you can see here on the side, it's a little hard to see through the glass, but they definitely have been rebuilding some paper here. One interesting note we'll take a look at here while we freeze the frame is that they built a few pedestals, which are stalk-like structures that they use to secure the nest to whatever it's secured to, and in this case it was the inside of the glass jar. Looks like they're feeding on the larvae. There's work being done here. So it looks like they're trying to make a go of it and repair the nest. So we'll see how they do here in another week or so. I think the pupating adults are probably having a better go of it than the larvae. And some of the larvae are still alive, as you can see they're moving. Let's put them back in and see how they do in another week. They're definitely curious about me, but they're not attacking, which is good. They're just sniffing around, seeing what's going on. Most of these guys were born here in the nest by hatching out as pupating adults. So let's close them up. Put their house back together. And this time I'm going to cover them a little bit more than we did before. Hopefully that'll keep more of the rainwater off of them. September 5th, 2022. We're going to check the progress of the relocated Germanica nest. Here you see there's been significant rebuilding of the paper on the nest. So it appears they've taken to the new space pretty well. There's new paper on the top, new paper on the sides. They're making new access points. Looks like they're building a new front door over here. gotten a significant amount of rainwater in the cage despite our protections for that. May have to readjust it. So you can see they're curious about what's happening here, but they're not attacking. They're buzzing around me. They're trying to assess the situation, but they're not attacking my gloves, my suit, nothing. But there's significant progress in the rebuilding of the paper on this nest, as you can see. One note back on voiceover here. If you take a look at this wasp, it appears to have been eaten. It was probably a pupating adult that was eaten by the others. It's probably in the process of dying, but it has no abdomen left at all. It's been eaten, and the wings are chewed off of it. This may indicate that the social structure in the nest is breaking down, and they're just sort of eating everything to survive. The pupating adults, also all the larvae have been eaten and they're gone. And they are creating paper on the nest, making new entrances and exits, but everything looks a little bit chaotic, maybe. This could be because the original queen, was killed off in the extraction at the client's home, and when we relocated it, there was no queen to maintain order. It's hard to see inside the nest now that they've created more paper outside of it, but there's no indication from what we can see that there's any eggs being laid, that there's any live larvae in open cells. There's only a few of the pupating silk cap cells, which are still hatching out. You can see here and there in this video and the various update dates that we filmed. There's still a few viable pupation cells, but the open larval cells and eggs don't seem to exist anymore. That would indicate they've probably been eaten, and this nest is in the process of dying. We have seen foragers come in, it looks like, to build paper around the nest, but what we're not seeing is a lot of activity of collecting insects to bring back for food, for example, protein for the larvae. That would indicate maybe there's no larvae left alive, and the only ones that are alive here were the pupating adults that came out of the silk-capped cells. And there's no need for protein in that environment because the adults only drink fluids, usually sweet carbohydrate fluids that they collect from flowers and nectar and so forth, and sometimes some of the fluids that they drink from live larvae. But if there's no live larvae left, then they're going to have to either starve or collect nectar out in the wild. But what we don't see is a lot of foragers bringing in any type of insects that they've malaxated and caught to feed larvae. So most likely all of the larvae and whatever eggs might have been in there have been eaten by these other adults that have come out of the pupation cells. So it was interesting to observe this nest as we looked at it in the relocation environment. They had attempted to make a go of it, and they had tried to put paper on the outside of it again, reestablish the envelope to protect the nest. And you have to understand they did do a good job of trying to adapt to this new space. Remember, the nest is upside down compared to how it would be in the wild. Normally it would hang from a structure in the opposite position, where the open cells that you see would face the ground. Right here, they're on its back. The nest is on its back facing up, and they had to readjust to that whole change in their natural environment. So there were aspects of what they did that showed great adaptability, but with no queen and no larvae and no eggs, the pupating adults that did hatch out in this world, this relocated environment, they didn't seem to know what to do with themselves, and the nest sort of started to degrade, it seemed, even though there was a pretty good population of live wasps and more being born all the time from the pupated cells that are silk cap cells. Almost a couple of weeks later, here on September 17th, 22, there's still plenty of them alive and running around inside the nest. There seems to be fewer of them. The population looks like it died off a little bit, but there's still plenty that are still there. Most of the silk caps that were closed off before look like they hatched out. September 26, 2022. We're going to take a look at our Germanica relocation. This was a nest we found at a client's property that we moved into this container a number of weeks ago. As you can see, they're still active in there. So as you can see here on September 26th, they were still pretty active. There's still a fairly good population on the nest. They had created enough of a protective environment to survive. And that's the bottom line. That was the purpose of this study, to see whether or not this nest would survive in any given form when it was relocated from its natural environment. So as we headed into autumn here, it was interesting to see how long it would survive as the weather got colder and as the autumn months came into play.
check them again in a few days.
So we went back in on October 7th, and there was a significant decrease in population at this point. There had been some obvious spider activity. You can see one of them hung up on a spider web here just outside the jar. The weather had gotten colder. As you can see, the last few of them here were starting to die. There's a lot more dead bodies around the periphery of the nest. The few that were still alive were hunkered down inside the nest. So just all in all, things looked like this nest was just about done. So here on October 16th of 22, we went back in again to take a look. We found only one sole survivor, at least one that was visible on the nest. There might have been others inside. Looked like it might be one queen, a new queen who maybe has mated and decided to overwinter here. But she was the only one visible on the nest at this point. This looks like one queen left. One probably new queen. There could be a queen deciding to overwinter here. It's alive. No sign of life today. Now it may be that there's a queen, a newer queen, an inseminated queen who is overwintering in here somewhere inside the nest. So we'll take it out today, dissect it a little bit, see if we can find any overwintering queens. But otherwise it looks like, as of this date, this nest is finally defunct. So we're going to pull it out of there today, see if we can get it opened up. Maybe there's a overwintering queen in there somewhere. Definitely some earwigs, which are typically inside nests, feeding on them at the end of their run. Definitely a few dead ones here. Alright, let's take a look at this guy. No sign of any queens in this section. There's one right there. This is probably a live queen about to overwinter. Yep, she's still alive. You can see how big she is compared to the workers in here. There's a couple of deceased workers, but the queen is still quite large. And if you see here carefully, you can see her moving. So if we take her into one of our habitats and let her hang out, most likely she's still alive. So let's set her aside for now. See if there's anybody else in there. There's some mites and things in here, but I don't see any more live queens. It's in the mid-40s today, so she is chilled right now, literally chilled, and that slows down the wasps. So they're kind of unable to function much. She can't fly. Chances are she probably can't sting or defend herself. But what we're going to do is bring her inside, see if she wakes up. Put her in one of the habitats, see what happens. But that's the end of this nest for the season. The relocation was what I would call a moderate success because it was able to survive from August all the way until October, when the weather killed it because it was too cold, and then they all died except for this last queen who appears to be trying to overwinter in there. So another one done for the season. Let's bring her into the research lab and see if she'll be viable. Okay, here's our overwintering queen. What we're going to do is put her into a little vial. We're going to let her hang out in there for a few minutes while we get her habitat ready for the winter. And we'll just see how long we can keep her alive during the winter and go from there. There's our girl. Let's see how she does this winter.